our aim today is have a conversation that is aimed at Bill in his question of how to deepen his in relationship and engagement with Vistage over the next year, 3 years, 5 years. But also for anyone who is thinking of speaking in a Vistage group. Maybe you've given 1 or 2 speeches and you're interested in extending and deepening the relationship. Maybe you're interested in just, what does Vistage look for from a good event? And also some feedback from members on what makes a speaker session special. Because I think we've got some feedback for what our members do not want from speakers, and some feedback on what is effective in a speaker session. So maybe, Bill, I'd just ask you to give a quick 60 seconds. Who are you? What's your workshop? And where do you stand today in terms of your relation to Vistage?
Yeah, sure. So, hey, Conor. So my name is Bill Gallagher. I live just outside of San Francisco, California. And I have been an international speaker. I'm a scaling up coach. I host a podcast on the subject. I'm on the advisory board of the Scaling Up organization. I do programs. I've done stuff in like 23 countries and dozens of cities and like that. So when I looked at some of our best coaching clients, the big full engagement stuff beyond our workshops and things like that, a number of them come from Vistage, and I thought, God, I really should reach out to and create a more consistent presence in the world of Vistage, like I've done in organizations like YPO or EO and so on. So I spent some time customizing or developing a new talk that I thought was relevant and fresh around scaling up. So some groups know well scaling up, and that's been around. It's still super valid, and we do all kinds of things around it. But I wanted to narrow it and focus it a little bit. So we began to study. I began to study what CEO mistakes made. So first, I looked at all the companies that I've worked with over the last 6 years, and I looked at all the mistakes that the CEOs that I would say the CEOs made, right, in my assessment. And then I started to go out to the other coaches in my immediate region and roundtable, the other coaches broadly. We have 230 some coaches around the world, I think. And I started asking, what are the top mistakes that you see CEOs make? And I've summarized those into a thing that'll probably continue to evolve as more and more input comes in from people. But we've had quite a bit down. Some consistent themes are emerging. So I distilled that down into a kind of an assessment tool of the top CEO mistakes, and then can connect each of the mistakes to something that we would address in the scaling up framework. And I put that together in a talk. I looked at the Vistage recommended format of the decisions and the takeaways and things like that. And I applied already online to the speaker what's it called? The directory or something like that, right?
Speaker Bureau is what we would call it in Europe.
Yeah, Speaker Bureau, right? So I did that. We've done that. And I've also done the welcome webinar. And now, and then like a takeaway and what there would be, it would be appropriate in a Vistage group to not sort of push the envelope of that promotional vibe, but to do it in an appropriate way. So we created a follow-on opportunity and that kind of thing that we can do that's appropriate to the Vistage environment. So I've done all that. Slides, workbook, handouts, takeaway, next steps, things like that, done the online thing. And now my question is, okay, aside from the basics, how do I begin to cultivate the relationships with the speakers? How do I find the immediate opportunities, right? How do I start to get the first few things? And get that going. And I just was contacted by someone to do a marketing event, which is different than a regular Vistage event, right? And I'm not sure about that. And then how to like do a really good job. So beyond the basics, but like what is the style and the approach that people love, that gets highly rated? You know, I'm committed that people just walk away like, holy shit, that was valuable, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a couple of things to cover in my answer. I think one, the content that you would deliver over the 2 or 3 hour period when you're in the room with the Vistage members. I think, you know, your background, you have experience with EO as a member entrepreneurs organization. You've got experience with YPO as a speaker giving sessions. I think one of the important differences, I also spent 13 years, I'm still a member of an EO forum. One of the differences between EO and YPO and Vistage in terms of bringing in speakers is in EO, there's the forum group, which shares things confidentially amongst them. When we bring in a speaker for an EO, it's typically the chapter level. So there will be people in that room who don't know each other, who don't regularly meet with each other.
Right.
Same with YPO. The speaker would come into a mix of all the different groups in the city. In Vistage, you're going to come into the equivalent of the forum group. And the difference there, the forum in EO is peer-led. The forum group, the Vistage group in Vistage is led by a leader who is responsible for the functioning of that group. And that individual, the Vistage chair, decides on speakers, works with the group to define what their learning needs are, typically on a 1-year rolling calendar. And the chair would get in touch with Vistage and look over available speakers and compare them against the calendar that he's putting together for his group. What are my groups saying that they need expertise coming in on? Vistage will be offering, you know, some local people who can provide that expertise, and also sometimes some regional or some national people if it's something very special. And you know, very often the Vistage chair has a lot of say over who gets to come in and work with the group. And the word of mouth between Vistage chairs, I think, is the single most important thing that gets you repeat bookings.
So be sure to send them
So you know, here, the online bit, that's excellent. You're going to get some good material. I think what you and I are going to do offline a little bit is have a look at the Vistage groups local to your area and see if you can just have a coffee with a couple of the local chairs, just so they get the feeling of who you are. And, you know, I do a lot of our speaker booking here in Spain, and what I'm looking for is less content than your ability to be assertive and control a room and engage in a way that I know that when you're pushed by people, there's a strength in you to push back. That your expertise is not just a process that you're going to walk through for 3 hours. You're going to be tested and pushed and asked to make this material practical in the lives and businesses of the people in the room. I think when I ask our members,
so let me just make sure I heard you right. So that's different than I just give a talk and everybody just goes along. These are CEOs who are going to challenge, question, grapple with, right?
Yeah. So they are expecting interaction, not just interaction with you, but interaction between themselves. So, you know, when I would sit down with someone and say, right, we want you to come and speak to a group, there's a couple of things that I would really stress. The first is, what's your message? And you know, I want 8 words or less. Why are you here? And I think, you know, the errors that CEOs make in scaling up would be the sort of short, clear statement. What is Bill here to work with us on? Then I would ask you, what are 3 takeaways that the CEOs in the room are going to walk away at the end of your session? And I will keep pushing you until the vague, broad idea turns down into something concrete.
Well, let me check that. So I'd be like, you're going to discover your Achilles heel, and how to overcome it, and what are the practical next steps to master, right, your CEO-ness.
Yep. And you know, if you say, you know, one of the takeaway is a worksheet on Achilles' heels, and for 30 minutes they're going to work in pairs or in threes, and they're going to go through a process to identify and acknowledge their Achilles heel. And I think you understand the dynamic of a forum group. You know, one of the powers of this group is it's going to meet every month for the rest of these guys' leadership life.
Right.
So if you can get accountability into the group, if they agree on an action, and you understand that you can use that group to, you know, put up a list of actions that have been agreed during your workshop, and say to the chair, you know, keep this flip chart, and I'd like you to pull it out next time. And if anyone has any questions, you've got my contact.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. So the takeaways, the actions promised, are captured and recorded and shared, not just individually, but by the group.
Yeah. So, you know, use that accountability. And you know, in the group, if you hear someone say they will do an action and it's clear, turn to the chair and say, you know, who holds accountability in this group? Let's get that up on a flip chart. And I'd like you as a group to own the accountability that next month you'll check in that this has been done.
So that we should put that in our worksheet, the who, what, when, as a thing that we open.
So, you know, I think Vistage love and hate accountability. You know, we would say that the 4 core values of Vistage, the underlying base value is trust. And you can assume when you walk into the room that that chair and that group have worked to really create a solid basis of trust. Much like the forum, Gestalt, proactivity, and confidentiality rules, Vistage has a similar baseline of trust. What's shared in that room, there is the assumption that that stays in the room. And it may be worth you acknowledging that confidentiality and expressing what your view is on anything shared. So, you know, I would always be explicit about anything that is shared about each of your businesses during the time that I am here will stay with me. I am assuming that we're in a confidential space where we can work on real issues. So trust, and the foundation stone of trust is this confidentiality. Then there's 2 that come together, caring and challenge. So as a speaker, we want you to have an interest in the individuals in the room, what their personal and professional goals are. You never let our questions remain generic. Push it back and say, you know, where are you? How's this affecting you today? And then this combination of caring and challenge. Sometimes you'll support them in working through. Sometimes you got to call bullshit. You got to say, you know,
ask if people have a BHAG. That might be something.
Oh, absolutely. You know, if you ask, do people have a BHAG, and a hand goes up, go, what is it? And challenge them. Do your people get it? If I called your receptionist right now, what would they say? What would they answer? So, you know, I think we often say in Vistage, these guys do not need another friend. They have enough friends in their social life around them in their business. They are not in Vistage because they want a friend. The thing that a member values is when they're challenged by someone that they've allowed to see that you have the credibility to challenge. And I think, you know, as a speaker, understanding where you have a domain of credible expertise. So, you know, you are a coach, you've worked with many CEOs, you've looked into many businesses. So you can answer certain things from that credibility. There's other, perhaps you don't have the experience of, but you can still challenge them. But you need to let them know, you know, we're stepping outside where I'm an expert, but I challenge you. What evidence do you have to support your claim? You know, when did this?
You know, I think when I think about our assessment exercise, I might actually ask the other members in the room that they work with to challenge their self-assessment, because like a lot of self-assessments, we all have a little delusion running, right?
They will love that, and I think, you know, much as in EO, the Johari window, this idea of, you know, one of the things that really helps build group cohesion is growing the Johari window. And there's
Yeah.
two. One, sharing something I haven't before shared with the group. So where you can get people to share something that is new for the group from them.
Right.
And the other is getting the group to help them see whether they really are self-aware. Reflect. And one of the things that we would often see is self-assessed Vistage members month one will tend to put 8s and 9s on a lot of the skills. After 1 year in Vistage, they will tend to self-assess at 4s and 6s.
Right. So, and you think, well, why are you getting worse while being in Vistage?
They will look at you and say, and I am 10 times better today, but I'm now aware of what a 9 really is, and that there is, there's no hiding. It's not, I can be a 9 for 30 minutes and then relax. Right. But I think, anything in your workshop that uses the individuals in the room to just hold a light up to each other.
Yeah.
So, if someone says, my self-assessment is this, you can ask them, does that seem right to you? And then you can ask the rest, does that seem right to everyone here? What, John or Joe, what's missing?
Yeah.
So I think that dynamic is important. And probably if I was doing an event for EO, I'm assuming the chat gift. So some people don't know each other. In a Vistage expert session within the group, I would assume these people have been together for 2, 5, 7 years. The average tenure of members in Vistage in a 16-person group is over 7 years. So these people have lived through ups and downs together. They've seen each other in tough moments professionally, in tough moments family. They've been through an awful lot. So, using that and bringing it out and, using the group to check up on people, I think is a very powerful thing. I think it will give you a lot of credibility as a speaker that you get this dynamic. What Michael Canick, who's a speaker who's given over 450 sessions, he said, don't think of it as a talk. It's a workshop.
It's a workshop,
This idea that, they're there to do work. So any tool that you pull out, 10% of the time explaining the tool, 90%, let's get into 2s, 3s, work as a group, pick one business, and do the work.
Can I drill in on that a little bit?
Yeah.
So when I think about, I've been told 2 to 3 hours, and it varies by amount. And when I think about that, I think that would be like 2 to 3 exercises, an exercise typically being 20, 30 minutes. So a little bit of setup, a little bit of exercise, and then into it. So I think about like 1 per hour from a cadence or from a fullness standpoint. So if I got 2 hours, I'm going to do 2. If I've got 1 hour, I'm going to do 1, like that. Yeah?
Absolutely. And I think less is more. That this is...
I like to talk faster. Is that and louder? Is that a good idea?
Well, I will send you a big long list of things not to do. One is say we'll come back to that point and then not get back to it. Another saying we're short on time, so I can't cover that. Vistage members hate that. Come with little material that you're going to go deep and make it practical. I think another thing that I try and help our speakers to think about is these people are not going to do the work when they go back to their companies. So a Vistage member, our range would be 5 million turnover and up, at least 20 employees. But I think if I look at our average member, they're turning over 10 to 20 millions. We've got a couple of 100 million turnover companies where there are big senior leadership teams. No one in the room touches operations. What we've learned at Vistage is we're where you've got a managing director that still has a role in the day-to-day, they'll miss meetings. They need to have a team, and they lead the organization through the team. And a huge amount of the Vistage challenging is the quality of this team, whether this team really is the team to deliver your strategy, how you work with this team to execute on the strategy. We don't want to see CEOs disappearing down into day-to-day operations. So I think anything that they're going to take away and do, you need to think of they're going to go back to their business and call someone into the room and say, hey, and hand them something. So if your worksheet can be something that they can do the work in the room, and the next day when they get back and they call in the person that they want to task with some big project, if your worksheet allows them to sit down and say, hey, I've had a look at this, I think there's something valuable for our organization, I'd like you to take charge of this. And that your worksheet allows them.
When I work with a group like this, my inclination is to use my regular workbook and perhaps a customized version of it, but and it has way more in there than we're going to cover. Now they can do some of that additional stuff on their own, but it also suggests work that they might do if they did further work for us, and I feel like that's good. So not only am I giving them away something for free, but then they're also seeing the kind of work that we do beyond. Is that a good idea?
So, you know, I can answer in two respects. One, you know, I do quite a lot of teaching and training and have had sort of mixed response to this. I think one, I've had a lot of people frustrated that we didn't cover everything. So I think and I have a big 100-page workbook that I don't edit. So if I'm running a 1 hour, a 2-day, a 3-day, or a 5-day retreat, I'll have the same workbook. And I think I'm quite clear and explicit upfront that this workbook is for a 5-day full retreat. We're only going to cover some of it, but I will always get some people who are a little bit frustrated that we only covered a little bit.
So mine's like 48 pages, and I would tend to do 3 in a group like this.
Yeah. You know, I think, you know, this is me answering as a speaker. I think I have failed to be clear enough out on the outset, and maybe I need to do something at the front of the workbook that just makes it clear that it's unlikely you will have addressed all of the pages in this workbook during your time with Conor. So big letters.
Yeah, so we'll make a note to try that. We'll try it both ways, and we'll see what the reaction is. Yeah.
And I think, you know, Michael, his approach is he has a website with a special password for any Vistage member, and all of the downloads are on there. So I think he would give the tools that he's going to work on specifically, but give at the end of his session, you know, anything we've covered here, all the downloads, there's a special password for Vistage members. Get in, have a look. It's all free for you to use.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's his balance between no one goes away thinking I haven't finished, you know, we can get through everything. But, you know, this is something that, you know, me as a speaker, I often have this question because, you know, there was some coach of speakers whose advice to speakers was never customize your materials. You know, have one set of materials and one proposal, and you know, keep to that. I think that's what I try to do, but I have not been completely successful in this. And actually, I have sort of a scaled down version, a middle version, and a longer version, which I don't like, because I think I have a similar approach as you. I want to give all of these tools, because I think a lot of this work you can go away and do yourself. And I'm quite happy if you jump on the phone or get on the email in 2, 3, 4 weeks and say, hey, Conor, I had a few questions about page 30.
So you're talking about customizing worksheets?
Yeah, and I think there I was giving an answer more from a perspective of Conor Neill, the speaker teacher, rather than Conor Neill as part of Vistage. and Conor Neill, the speaker, has had some mixed results in not customizing and reducing workbooks down to just what we're going to cover. I think, here being explicit up front and perhaps even putting it in the book, I think would be helpful. But I think being explicit that this is not the end. This is not 2 hours and you're done, or 3 hours and you're done. There's a lot of material here. And I guess,
I think in our case, I can connect a number of them. I can say, here's all the kind of work that we do, and we're going to give it all to you. And there's a lot of instructions in there so you can continue, because our work is best done back with the team. And we're going to point to the core assessment that we'll do in this one, points to different ones of these that you might want to use. So like, here's the next step, and we're giving it to you to go run with it.
And here I think we can touch a little bit on this, what in EO would be non-solicitation, and in Vistage would be a sort of request to not outright sell. I think the advice you would get from the Vistage Speaker Bureau is deliver a damn good workshop, and there's no doubt that people who need it are going to reach out and have you on their mind as someone to go to. I think
so let me check that. In our case, it'd be like, deliver a damn good workshop. And then if you think your leadership team would love to do more of this kind of work, like beyond that points to from your assessment, then we have a workshop coming up and the flyers are there. I leave it to you from here. Like, that would be the extent of what I would say.
Absolutely. I think, that there's no forced yes or no. There's we've done a workshop. You've seen who I am. You've seen how I engage with you. There's a lot of tools in the bag. Some of them you have on the room. Now there's a workshop coming up. If it was of interest, that's just one thing with you here. Anything, you've got my email, you've got my website. I love this type of engagement. I'm here and waiting for your call. So I think,
as a follow-on, do you have any notion of whether people like a 1 or 2 day workshop follow-on for their team?
That I couldn't answer.
Okay. I typically have done a 1 day, but some people really like to spend the time to do 2 days. So it's something I'm thinking about. Which would you like more?
Yeah, here, me as a teacher, probably one of the things that I'm moving towards is the minimum time I'll spend with a leadership team is 2 days. Yeah. I just think anything shorter, we're only just getting to know each other. So, one of the things I'm doing in my own life as a speaker is reducing as much as possible the 1 hours, the 2 hours, and getting more and more 2 full days with groups that I really want to work with, because any less is just entertainment.
So we should consider offering a 2 day workshop. Yeah. Okay.
And being clear, and I guess the criteria of why is, to do this work effectively, how much time do you need? And I'm vaguely speculating. I used Rockefeller habits in the last scale-up business I had. And I think whether it's traction, EOS, scale-up, this idea of the 3 monthly goals, the monthly goals, the weekly things, the daily huddles, getting them installed and started running in a company, I think, less than 2 days at the outset. One, it shows the company doesn't see it as important enough if they can't come 2 full days. But I think the question comes down to you of, what is necessary so that this really begins to take hold and make a difference in the organization.
So, and I would tend to think that, I see the CEOs in the Vistage Group, and then the ones that want to follow on would come to a 2 day thing, 1 or 2 day thing, and they would be bringing 4 to 7 people with them. So we'd have teams of, say, 5 to 8, typically doing the follow-on with us for a couple days.
Yeah, I remember, was it probably 12 years ago, I brought 2 of my senior team to Vern Harnish running that sort of workshop. Yeah,
That's
and I think,
exactly like what I do. Is the follow on. It's just like Vern. Yeah.
yeah, and I think, you know, Vistage is a wonderful environment where you connect with the leaders, where they get to see who you are, what type of work you do some practical work on themselves, on their own companies. And there are going to be individuals who have a hunger to go deeper with this, and they will reach out and connect with you. And I, you know, Vistage, we say Vistage is a gym for fit athletes, not a hospital for sick people. And chair, if a member has, if a member's strategy is easily obtainable, the group should be holding them to a higher goal. No one in the room should be comfortably reaching the goals they set themselves. The group should be helping them stretch, helping them to expand to the biggest potential that they can have. And that doesn't mean that, you know, you burn your family by dedicating all your time to grow the business fast. It's in a holistic way. The mission of Vistage: increase the effectiveness and enhance the lives of CEOs and senior executives. And this combination, increase the effectiveness, so take better decisions, focus your time, be with the right people, hire and fire, and get great people working on things. Enhance your life, balance. You know, who do you like to work with? What type of projects excite you? You know, how to get your life 2, 5, 8 years from now to something that you really love to do.
Right.
And I think, you know, I find probably, you know, EO, it tends to be the owner of the business is in the group. In Vistage Spain, 90% of our members are an employee in the role of CEO. They are career CEOs, career leaders. And so they have a much bigger obligation to the business and to running the business well than perhaps an EO member who's the owner or the founder of the business would likely have. So, you know, this increase the effectiveness in all aspects that matter in the life of a leader.
Totally get it.
So I think the next steps is
that's how to deliver value. You said how to connect was begin to network out, like reach out to local ones and have a coffee or that kind of thing. Is there a preferred approach to them? The local?
Well, to be honest, I don't know what the corporate answer to that might be. I think, you know, I cannot imagine a Vistage chair not being open to a conversation with someone who shares a similar curiosity for business, desire to help people grow. So I think it would be very unlikely that if you reached out, you know, if you just went into LinkedIn and put Vistage chair, San Francisco area, and hit them a connection request, you know, given through a few workshops, speaking to Vistage, would love to have a coffee and hear about what you're up to. I find it very unlikely you wouldn't get a yes and have a coffee. I think Vistage chairs are very good at coffee.
I have one coming up, one that works with a current client who's in a Vistage group. I have another past client, Vistage chair that I've connected. So a couple of those we should talk to.
Yeah. And then, you know, once you've run a session in one chair's group, every other chair is going to ask them, how did the members feel it went? How did the members rate it?
Right.
But I think, you know, you have run enough workshops that you can cope with this dynamic. I think where someone would struggle is they've not got 100 workshops under their belt. They've not, you know, been a couple of years building.
I think if you're new, you're a subject matter expert, but you're not an experienced workshop leader, then you probably be challenged. You might want to do some work before you walk in front of a Vistage group. Yeah,
absolutely. I think, you know, I can see you, Bill, as someone, as if I challenge you, you almost smile because it's this is where we get to test this work. This is where we get to really test out. And I think that attitude that all questions are coming from a point of curiosity, and these people in the room are thinking about their business, are thinking about their 3 to 5 year goals and strategy and how they can use this. So any question you're going to get is coming from that perspective of them thinking, you know, how do I bring this back and make a difference in my business? So on that note, a real pleasure to get this chance just to have a conversation. And I think, you know, I'll be reaching out to you over the next weeks and months just to see how those connections go. I'll be having a quick look in to see if there's 1 or 2 people I can connect you to. But I know you have what it takes to give a great Vistage speaker session.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you know, in other realms outside of Vistage, I can promise a particular rating, right? I can always promise a above 9 rating, right? Like I just, you know, like I know across those groups, and I have a feeling that there's enough of a similar dynamic, especially having been in a couple of Vistage groups, and to come from that place without being cocky, right? But just the confidence of the experience to say, no, I can do that group. And then the insight, we've taken notes during this session, and I'll make tweaks to the way we run exercises and some of the slides that we put in and frame it. And we'll focus in the content a little bit more to prepare for more of the interaction. So enough content to get a vigorous discussion going, and then a nice segue into the next exercise, and maybe 2 and 3 hour versions. I think will be probably really great. Thanks so much, Conor. Yeah, thanks for taking time with me. Look forward to talking.
Real pleasure. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye-bye.